You are listening to the Mystic Paranormal Podcast with your host, Sean Lonker. Ghosts, demons, time travel, it's all right here at www.mysticparanormal.net. Want to be a guest on Mystic Paranormal? Visit our website at www.mysticparanormal.net. Click on Contact and email Sean letting him know why you would like to be on the show.
Well, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you may be. I am Sean Lonkert, and you're listening to the Mystic Paranormal Podcast. Okay, so Linda, I want to go ahead and welcome you to the show tonight. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. And you?
I'm doing perfect. It's a nice, cool October night out there. The heat's finally gone. My favorite time of the year.
It's been beautiful.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just said it's been beautiful here in Wisconsin.
Oh, absolutely. Now, before we get into your book and all your monster discoveries and all that, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Linda Godfrey?
Wow. But you get to a certain age and there are a lot of things you can say to answer that.
Right.
Some good, some bad. But I've actually been exploring and investigating and writing about these strange sorts of creatures for 26 years, ever since I kind of broke that news story about the Beast of Bray Road, which I never thought would be anything more than maybe 2 weeks of fun in my hometown of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And it has just grown and grown, and people have never lost interest. I worked at the newspaper for 10 years after that story broke, really not thinking about anything beyond just sort of taking care of the requests and the reports that had continually come into me since the very first story broke. But after 10 years, I started thinking, well, there's still so much interest and so many people wanting to know about it. I really should put it together in a book so that we have it somewhere. And, that was really still before the internet got too big and everybody was on Facebook or whatever. And the book seemed like the way to go. And I didn't have any trouble selling it. So it went out and it just never stopped. Since then, I had the chance to do the Weird Wisconsin and Weird Michigan books. Several others, and lately it's I think I'm up to like 18 published books right now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So starting late, but the whole thing, I never did this thinking I would have a career, or obviously not for the money. You do not make money writing books like this, but because I was curious why people were saying they had seen these things, what these things could be, and why they continued to keep seeing them. And the Bray Road sightings continue to the present day. Not many people realize that.
Yeah, what is the Beast of Bray Road? A lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah, and I don't claim to know exactly what it is, at its most basic level, but what most people see is something that looks like an upright walking canine with the head of a German Shepherd or wolf, a long fang, with long fangs with a muzzle, pointed ears on top of the head. So it's not Bigfoot. We are not talking about some version of Bigfoot here.
Right.
Usually covered with shaggy brown fur. And then again, if you have a look at the feet or the legs, anybody who sees those clearly knows for sure they're dealing with a canine, because canines, unlike humans and Bigfoot and even bears, canines walk on their toe pads. And there's a real skinny, narrow bone that would kind of correspond to our foot bone that leads up to their, what would be equal to our heel and ankle bone called the hock. Okay. And no other, the bears don't walk that way. Bigfoot doesn't. Humans don't. We walk flat-footed. It's called plantigrade. And so when you see the leg formation, there's no way somebody can fake that.
Right. Sounds like some kind of mutation or something,
It almost does, except the great majority of people who see this say that it looks all canine, and the one thing that makes people think of a werewolf is that it is up on its hind legs. which is just not normal for wolves in the wild. But it's not supernatural. Any mammal can be trained or motivated, or maybe sometimes forced to by loss of a limb or paw injury, to walk upright on their hind legs. It's just not natural, and probably doesn't feel that good to them, because their bodies are designed for each set of limbs to absorb half the impact, and all of a sudden their hind legs are absorbing all of it, and they're using their forward limbs for things like, people have seen them actually carrying away pieces of roadkill and deer, parts of deer.
Wow.
So they're using their upper limbs in a very opportunistic way that makes them develop more muscles in their upper limbs, of both the front and back limbs. The same way, if you go and do bicep curls every day, you're going to get big biceps. Well, they get big shoulder. They're not really shoulder muscles. They're upper arm muscles, because they don't have shoulders like we do, like primates do. Bigfoot does. Gorillas do. Humans do. But canines don't. And you can tell by any picture of a dog sitting down. The limbs will be right in front of it, and the paws resting on the floor. Everybody can visualize that, because they can't just roll. They don't have rotator cuffs and shoulders, so they can't just roll their arms to the sides, and sit back like we do. So there's a very big anatomical difference, and they appear to be in these cases. Now, there are other smaller percentages of sightings where people see different types of upright canines, and we can talk about those later. But the ones that people see the most look like they're all canine. They do have some funny actions. By funny, I don't mean ha-ha funny. I mean, kind of odd actions, such as many witnesses, even of this average type, will say, well, it looked at me right in the eyes, and I felt that it was telling me it was superior, that it had, and they'll use the 3 words sneer, jeer, or leer. They'll say it was kind of showing me that it was better than I was, that it could get me if it wanted to, that kind of thing. And they seem to sort of transmit this message, not like in King's English. It almost seems to be like a combination of body language and maybe, who knows, some sort of very simple, direct, empathic abilities. I don't. It's the only way to put it. Not like telepathy as we think of it, but somehow they're getting a wordless message across to so many of the people that see it. And that's not something that you hear when people tell about normal wild animal encounters.
Right.
For instance, my husband has come almost face to face with both a cougar and a bear at separate times. The bear while he was deer hunting in a stand, and neither time did he feel they were giving him any sort of message. The cougar was actually stalking him, and it was more like he knew that cougar would like to eat him if it could, but it wasn't because of any sort of message. And the bear was just like, ho hum, who are you? I'm going on my way. There was nothing there. Whereas these creatures tend to somehow be interested, and that's what freaks people out. It's like they will often say that they felt these creatures were very intelligent, more intelligent than your average animal or your average bear, as Yogi Bear used to say. And that's a little unusual too, but they feel like there's this awareness coming from them, and that's just not what you get in a normal wildlife encounter, and it's one of those mysteries that I'm still curious about and still trying to solve, although it's very difficult because, of course, we don't have a specimen that's known to me anyway, to study like we do with other creatures. Nobody's been able to knock one out with a dart gun or anything like that and bring it in, and I certainly don't hope, I certainly do not want people to be shooting at them, literally hunting. I'll say I'm hunting, but when I'm hunting, it's for evidence and things left behind.
You're not trying to bring back a body or nothing.
And clues, no. That's not my intent, definitely not. And it's, hunting in a more metaphorical sense, hunting for evidence rather than than hunting for bodies, because they and the Bigfoot both seem to people who observe them to be more than what we think of as simple animals, although no animals are really simple. They remind, even the wolf, which looks very, very canine and not so human, still has these human aspects to it. The way it looks at them, the way it walks and runs on the hind legs. That it's just not the average normal thing.
Right. When you say this thing is like, when it stands out to somebody that it's not like the normal wildlife that you would see, do you think that this is something paranormal, or do you think that it's actually something normal, just undiscovered?
I think that it could be something normal. That is, of course, we've already talked about how the upright stance
Right.
could be just a normal thing if it's motivated somehow. It's certainly not an impossibility for it to run and leap. And they would naturally, I think, be very intelligent to be able to learn and sustain a practice that's really against their natural body build. And also, it's pretty well known that when people and probably animals too use their brains in new ways, use their muscles in new ways, you actually do get smarter. You sort of build your brain. And maybe having this new posture and being able to do things that their species normally doesn't do does make them more intelligent than the average, say, wolf or dog or wolf-dog hybrid, whatever these are. Now, when it comes to the paranormal, there's more and more evidence that what we call paranormal is not always something that's like spooky, spirits, that sort of thing, but abilities that are built into our bodies and brains that we just, not everyone is equally endowed with the ability to use them, and others of us, just may not think about it. But, there's that really good book, the title is something like Dogs That Know When Their Masters Are Coming Home. And this was a series of scientifically designed studies that showed that indeed the dogs that were sitting at home waiting for their masters to come home, it didn't matter what time it was or if they stayed longer or shorter periods of time, it didn't matter if they changed their route home. When they turned from their duties at whatever they were doing and began with the intent to reach their homes, these dogs jumped up, started behaving differently, went to the door, began waiting, that sort of thing. Now, that seems to me like some innate built-in ability that our present science just doesn't quite understand yet, but perhaps we will eventually.
Right. When did you come to want to study this creature? I mean, have you ever actually seen photographs of this beast or anything like that?
Well, people, of course, have sent me photographs right from the very beginning, and there are some, of course, that you can throw out right away because you can tell it's a person in some kind of an animal suit, usually partially hidden behind a tree or strategically placed between corn stalks. So
of course,
you can't really see the whole thing. Those you throw out. And then there are others where there is indeed some tall brown furred thing, but in almost every case, it's either obscured by light and shadow, or it's formed by light and shadow, or it's blurry because perhaps it was moving, or the photographer was moving with the camera, or some people have suggested maybe these things are from a slightly different world than we are, with a slightly different setting to their electromagnetic frequency, that all of us have electromagnetic fields around us, and just don't quite jive with our settings, and therefore with our tools like cameras that we use to capture images of ourselves and things from this natural world. So there are various possibilities as to why this should be that I haven't seen yet. A picture of a dog man that I could get behind and say, oh yeah, this couldn't be anything but real, because you can, and such a picture would have to be, and it could be a video too, would have to be shot from different angles over enough of a time length with enough context of other objects around it with markers that we would be able to calculate the sizes from, and then would be able to pass muster in the labs of photo experts that can tell when something's been tampered with or photoshopped or whatever. And that part is getting harder and harder because our technology is getting so fabulous, I mean, remember what pictures looked like when they were taken from cell phones even like 10 years ago?
Yeah, you're right.
What they are now.
Yeah.
I'm taking pictures of my flowers and they're like house and garden quality photos. Not because I'm a great photographer, but because this camera is so darn good.
Mm-hmm.
So, and hopefully we will get around that. And maybe, I'm thinking maybe somebody's going to invent something like a holographic camera where you can take a picture and it'll see around all of the creature so that you can see around behind it. And of course, that would have to do with strange things against what we know about light and bending light, that kind of thing.
That's an idea you should try to patent.
I should, but imagine if it took a holographic picture and you could see around behind it, and you either saw a zipper,
yeah,
or you saw a mane and a tail and things that couldn't be faked. That could make a lot of difference. Now, so those things are improving.
Right. Now, Linda, do you believe in your heart that this creature is authentic? Based on your research alone, do you believe this is real? There's definitely something here.
I believe the phenomenon is real. I believe that people are seeing what they're describing. They're seeing. I don't think it's possible that there are that many hoaxers. And I almost think you have to put the observers of this and the observers of the Bigfoot kind of in the same camp.
Mm-hmm.
It would take so many. There are many more Bigfoot sightings. It would take thousands of interconnected hoaxers, all with this plan that they're going to pretend to see Bigfoot and try and put one over on the world and coordinate it. And I just don't think that is what's happened in either of these cases.
Right.
So many people see these things and they think they're the only one. And they'll sometimes go for decades before finding out that there's I hear that all the time from people who send me reports. I thought I was the only one, and I saw this thing and I just went home and Googled and found out I wasn't, that I could, report to you or so-and-so. And that kind of sincerity makes me believe it. And plus, they also often say things like, it changed my life because I realized there are things that are more than our school books have told us, and they do exist. And every day I have to think about that. And oftentimes they'll say they wish they had never seen it because it is such a paradigm bending experience to, people will say things like, it just sort of knocked my world upside down.
Mm-hmm. I will have to say, I used to paranormal investigate. I don't do it anymore, but I'm sure you've heard of the EVP phenomena. I never believed in that kind of stuff, but I'll tell you what, when I went out there and actually got it for myself, wow, it does change your life. I'll
tell you what, that EVP scares me more than any beast or creature.
Isn't that crazy how that happens?
It's so freaky. Yeah, to hear what sounds like a little child growling, "I'll kill you, mother."
Yeah, yes.
I mean, that's frightening.
It's insane. It makes you wonder what is standing right there beside you whispering in that little recorder.
Exactly.
And it's right there.
It is. Yep. I've had a few. I had a few experiences when I was investigating and traveling and taking pictures for Weird Wisconsin and Weird Michigan that really freaked me out, that I thought never could have happened. And it's not my main. I mean, I wasn't even there with a lot of equipment. I just had my phone with recorder and a good camera, and that was it. But still, very shocking things happened, and
right.
There's more than we can see. We can't hear dog whistles, but we know the dogs hear them.
Right.
We can't see both ends. We can't see all frequencies of light, but we know that they come in a big sliding sequence of light wave frequencies.
Right.
And there's just more to the universe than we can perceive with these kind of stunted 5 little senses that we have.
Right, and I wanted to say, we're not a large program like Coast to Coast AM. I know you've been on there many times. Where do people get your books and stuff? I like to break it down several times during the show because some people have to listen and go away and then come back. Where do they get your books at?
Thank you. Well, they're widely available on the internet, and some of the brick and mortar stores carry some of them. It depends. For stores, it depends on where they're located and what their customers are most interested in. But there is if you go to lindagodfrey.com, that's my WordPress blog, and there's a books and bio page where you can see other pictures, and there's a list of the books. There's a couple of them, even the ones that are out of print, you can search on some of the used bookstore sites and find copies of them to buy. But several of the latest ones and the Weird Wisconsin and Michigan are almost always in the in the Barnes and Noble and other bookstores. So all over the place, but generally the internet for sure. You can find them all over.
Now, can people get actual signed copies from you? Is there another way to go about that? Like if they wanted to, hey, I want Linda's autograph. How would they do that?
It gets a little dicey if it's out of the U.S. If it's because then the postage costs more than the book does. But
yeah, you're right.
People in the U.S. I did have a P.O. box. We moved recently, and I haven't gotten a new P.O. box. But if someone wants to do that and can send me like do a PayPal or send a money order for the book plus the shipping, and it's one that I have, then I can sign it and send it to them. So people can ask me that and see if we can work something out on. They can contact me for all kinds of things and for sightings of strange things, also from lindagodfrey.com. It has my email and it has a form that you can fill out if you've seen any of these things.
Right. How many events do you hear about? Like, how often do people write to you and say, Linda, you won't believe what I saw?
Well, it's been 26 years, and to my amazement, I still usually receive 1 or 2 a week on the average.
Okay.
Sometimes it's more. It doesn't sound like a lot until you think about.
It adds up.
50 some in a year, or 50 some weeks 52 weeks in a year.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so that 1 or 2, that's probably between 60 and 100 a year, and like I said,
wow.
Sometimes more. And some of them, they're not all equal. There are some, like I heard a scream in the woods, and you can't do too much unless there's other corroborating evidence. Like they also then they found big footprints, or somebody they knew told them they had a sighting there. That makes it a little bit more useful. All the way to full-blown daylight, fairly close-up, face-to-face encounters, which do occur. They're also not that common, but there again is a complete different scale.
Right.
So, but I'm glad to get any, always thankful, even if somebody just has what they consider a minor incident, that may just plug into the other associations in ways that they wouldn't even realize. Maybe somebody says, well, I just saw a trackway of what I think are Bigfoot prints, and send it to me not knowing that 3 other people have just reported having Bigfoot encounters or Dogman encounters in that same area.
Right.
And the footprints are the thing that helps prove these other sightings. So your detail, may be somebody else's big important fact.
Right. Now, you talk about so many different creatures here. Let's move on from this guy. What about skinwalkers? What is a skinwalker?
Well, they're generally known for being associated with the Navajo people in the American West and Southwest. And there are variations with most of the tribal nations that exist. Sort of seems to have their own form of it. And generally, when you talk about the skinwalkers, in the case of the Navajos, they consider these people to be their word is often witch, which is not like modern day Wiccans at all. It's somebody that has learned different forms of ritual practices and used them for bad purposes.
Oh.
And what they're able to do through doing some really horrible and reprehensible acts, I'm not even going to mention, is that they learn to somehow project from themselves a perfect likeness of, or maybe sometimes an imperfect likeness of some other creature. It could be a man, it could be a large bird, it could be various things. And then these creatures are able to go out and do things for them. Some say that they are able to physically transform their bodies, or that they can be shown in other forms of light phenomena. So it's kind of a really scary thing.
Right.
They don't, and it's something that's somewhat tied to any sort of the old time pagan religions, where you had nature worship and shamans practicing these rituals and that sort of thing. You'll find very similar things all over the globe. The berserkers in Viking times were said to be able to do the same things, and the druids in parts of England and Europe, and so and it goes back very, very far into antiquity. This could be another whole subject to talk about.
Right.
But it's not generally something you want to delve into. And it goes by other names too. For instance, the Canadian Cree and up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan will do what they call the bear walk.
Oh, okay.
And it's something very similar. So you have the bear walkers. So it's a widespread malevolent practice in most cases.
That's just, it's hard to believe that stuff like that's out there. I mean, do you think this is interdimensional beings? I mean, is there a possibility that these things are coming from a different dimension, or do you think it's right here completely?
Well, a lot of people think that there is sort of like a second world that's at a slightly higher electromagnetic function than ours, that is right here, that is developed as another field of this planet that is in our world, and yet we're not generally able to be aware of it. And actually, the latest cutting-edge physics formulations bear that out and predict that there are other dimensions, at least a certain number. I think one number was that there had to be at least 11. The only thing is, those theories, well, many parts of them have been proven right, and it's expected that they're predicting these things correctly, but they don't tell us what those other worlds are like, or if we could go into them and do things like they show in all the movies and TV. Some would be curled so tightly and minusculely that we couldn't even begin to think about, being part of them. So, there's a lot of science there, I think, that is yet to be discovered about this sort of thing. But I did want to mention one other thing about the skinwalkers is that they will often have a more human-like appearance. Many of the incidents occur near the Native people's national lands or reservations, and they will often look different than just those things that simply look like wolves or dogs standing upright. For instance, they often will have shoulders, and they'll have hands instead of paws. They'll be taller. Their faces may look different. Sometimes the faces are described as more human-like. They can go on all fours or upright. There are just different qualities. They do not really look like the ones that were described on Bray Road.
Right. Do you think that maybe technology like CERN, I don't know if you've heard much about that, could actually discover something about these different dimensions where these worlds could be right there? Do you think we can discover that through that?
Yeah, well, that's what they're doing with the Hadron Collider.
Yes.
And all of the nuclear physics that they're working on now, and particle physics, trying to figure out how to get all the gluons and the muons and all these crazy little things to how to understand what they're doing, and I hope not, but probably to manipulate them too. That's generally what our science does with things. I really don't know. Some people are very fearful that these practices are going on, think we're going to get into big trouble with them. Other people are excited that it may actually show us where some of these other worlds are, and if they are available or even smart for us to
Right.
want to get into and approach. We don't know if what they are exactly. It's very hard to say.
Me, myself, I'll tell you what, I'm on the fence. It's so interesting to see what they can discover, but by the same token, you don't know if you want to know. I mean,
Right.
where do you stand on that? Are you more for it or more, I don't know.
Well, I think I love science. I really do. And I'm all for scientific discovery with ethics.
Right, right.
That's always the key. It's very hard for us all being human beings, not to want to do things and sort of play God and, make worse weapons and all sorts of other things that we really might be better off without. On the other hand, it's just impossible to resist going along and finding out all the new, cures for cancer and
Mhm.
other types of medicinal values and ways to feed more people and improve our planet. It's always a two-sided coin. And I always pray a lot that people who are making key decisions in these sorts of things would really be able to make the right ones for humanity and for our future.
Right. Here's a question for you, Linda. Have you heard of any paranormal activity or UFO sightings that are near, like Bray Road or where these creatures are seen?
Oh, sure.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, my latest book, Monsters Among Us.
Right.
Yeah, details 3 years that I've spent assisting a property owner who lives very close to Bray Road. Not exactly on it, but right out there, very near where many of the sightings have happened. And all kinds of experiments have been performed. He's put up trail cams. I've helped him do all kinds of things out there, like putting. We tried. This was his brilliant idea. Tried putting an old iPhone inside a deer carcass.
Oh, wow.
He had deer carcasses that he put out, that were brought from roadkill things that were legal to take, and placed in his field, and then different things would happen to them. You can read about, and there are pictures too in the book, all kinds of different things. We'd get these strange misty columns. There would be things that would be dismembered that a butcher said nothing but a meat cleaver with a big cutting board could have been used. And this is out in the guy's hayfield, so it doesn't seem like it should be likely. Many light forms of all different sites, things that looked like UFOs, and even I do describe this, the homeowner and another colleague and I, all three of us simultaneously witnessed one of those basketball-sized orbs of light. I don't know how else to describe it.
Right, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It's like a lit up spheroid, perhaps, maybe you could say. It came directly all the way across the hayfield toward us, and ended up about 30 feet in the air and 30 feet from the car, and just stopped and was just hovering there in the air. And I don't know if I should let you hear the finish. Obviously,
No, we'd love to.
But my colleague picked up a huge flashlight and shined it at this thing after it had, we were just sitting there all the time it was coming across the field going, oh my gosh, it's coming this way. It can't be. What is it? That sort of thing. And then it got up there and we were just shocked because it stopped and it was just there. And when he shined the flashlight on it, we all saw it. It sort of trembled a little bit, but it was like we all thought it was like surprised. Like it didn't expect us to do that. And then it just sort of powered off, going sort of in on itself. It's hard to describe. And then we all just kind of freaked out because that wasn't right, and the homeowner is a retired math and physics teacher from Chicago.
Right.
And he was just sitting there going, that can't be right. It's not physics. Physics doesn't allow it to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it did, and we saw it. Three pretty well trained eyewitnesses seeing the same thing all together. And there was nothing out there that could have been creating it. Nothing. It was just a dark hayfield.
Trust me, I've been there. And people wanted to ask me this too, Linda, before the show even began, was if these kind of creatures are real, how come we don't find the dead bodies anywhere? And the only answer I could give them is like, how many times have you been in the woods and you don't see no dead bears or anything? Which is weird. You don't see dead deer unless they're on the side of the road.
Right. And that's a really good question. And I think people always have the right to ask questions and should ask questions like that. It doesn't bother me a bit. And that actually is a good answer that you gave, because for one thing, there aren't as many of the larger predator species.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine if, you see herds of deer all the time, and you know how many deer there are walking around. Imagine if you saw giant herds of wolves walking around.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. These animals have like 30 mile diameter, or 30 mile ranges that they could do in one day. There's just a couple of them in very large areas. So if one of them dies, chances are high that you won't see it. It's going to be somewhere in that 30 mile radius. And once something does die, other things come and eat it and tear it apart and take it away. And there's, in very short order, there's not going to be much left of it. Now, some people believe that the Bigfoot, for instance, are able to come and retrieve their dead.
I've heard that, yes.
And that they take care of them. I don't know that it's been proven, but it's been shown that elephants can recognize their dead relatives and mourn over them, and stand guard over them for days before they will leave. I've seen that on National Geographic.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, elephants are very intelligent animals too. So that's a possibility. And then I have asked many Native American friends and acquaintances about some of these things, and they believe that the Bigfoot and the upright canines are both creatures from great antiquity, that they were here before people were, at least in this hemisphere, and that they come from what they call the spirit world, which maybe we would call another dimension or another world, or the other world or something else, and that they just know where the portals or the entrances are, and that when they're here, they're fully flesh and blood and corporeal. They need to eat, they need energy, they can reproduce, but if they are hurt or have some other reason that they need to get back to their own place, they know where to go and how to get there and where these openings are. And so the other thing is that many people will shoot the creatures if they feel they're being threatened. I've had several different people tell me this. They had emptied clips, automatic clips, point blank, into both the Dogman and the Bigfoot, and thought for sure that they should have killed them, and then not even find a blood trail.
That's amazing. It just makes you wonder, how is it not penetrating the skin? Is there something deeper to the situation? I mean,
it's like they're made of Kevlar,
Yeah, something.
And it's both types of animals, and they just, it's like the old Timex watch, takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
Right. I mean, we were talking about, intelligent animals actually taking care of their dead and moving their dead. I've actually even seen, like, ants carrying dead ants in groups.
Yes, I have to.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know. You don't see dead ants laying around anymore. It's like they collect them, and maybe they have their own little rituals that we don't even know about.
Yeah, I'd hate to think of ant rituals. Who knows what that's would be.
I wanted to ask you this, too. What is a Wendigo?
Well, it's a little bit contestable. Part of it depends on where you go. There are the Northern Canadian Cree that have their legends. Then there are more the East Coast, like around Maine and that sort of region, where they have their ideas of it. But I really looked at this question a lot when I was writing my several of my books, and I had to look it up. And what I discovered is that the widest spread idea of the Wendigo is that it starts out with a human being that allows itself to be tempted. And you have to imagine, this is mostly a northern sort of creature. It comes from the fact that there's not a lot to eat in the northern forests in the winter, and that often starvation would be the rule, going way back when, and people would be tempted to turn into cannibals, and that they believed that if you did succumb to the temptation and become a cannibal, that then your spirit would start hardening and you would turn into a Wendigo, and you could go all the way to a spirit Wendigo.
Wow.
And there are other types that go farther than that, where the longer it's alive, the bigger it gets, until some of them are like 22 feet tall, and the humans are just like little hors d'oeuvres to them. And usually the remedy is that they melt, and then you find either the original hardened person or the original hardened heart of the person who became the Wendigo. But it generally is involved. It's a sort of monstrous thing that can be part spirit, or in some cases, even if they had, a mentally challenged human that was sort of deranged for any number of reasons and became a cannibal, they might also call that a Wendigo. And there was an incident that I have, I believe it's in my American Monsters book, where this actually happened on a bus in Canada, where a man riding the bus had been reading about the Wendigo legend, and then he got on this bus and ended up killing the passenger next to him and starting to eat
Wow.
the man's flesh right in front of the horrified bus passengers.
Oh my God.
And it was made headlines as a Wendigo. They were calling this man a Wendigo.
Wow. Just hearing something like that, just I was going to ask you, one of my next questions was going to be, what's the scariest thing that you've actually heard? But I don't know what can top that.
Yeah, because that's like real time.
Right.
That's a human who was influenced and in front of all these people, and nothing seemed to stop it. But, my latest book, The Monsters Among Us book, has some really amazingly creepy stories. And I set out to write this book with the idea that it would be a place to put many of the more out there stories that I might have even rejected in earlier days, because I realized, that I decided I was maybe weeding out things just because they seemed outlandish to me, when they really were just as valid and real as experiences to the people that had them as any of the more, say, normal. If a sighting of something that people call a dog man or Bigfoot could be considered normal at all, you know what I mean? There are degrees of normalcy. So my original title for that book was going to be The Stranger Side of Strange Things. And it's weird, but once I started working on it, really more of these types of stories began flooding in. And I really had some very convincing transformation type of stories, which I had not had before. There was one where this little girl and her brother were playing outside of a laundromat in LA, and a back alley, and they were kicking a ball around, and they saw this kind of a trap door in the parking lot.
Wow.
Ground open, and a man stuck his head out, and the girl described him as being dressed in this kind of old style, reminded me of Jerry Seinfeld's puffy shirt.
Okay.
Had like a pirate shirt. He was dressed unusually, and that sort of intrigued her. And he was trying to get her to come over and talk to him, and she got close enough that she could see that he was standing on some sort of ladder that went down into the earth. And as she came closer, he was calling her by name, and she thought that made her suspicious, because her brother hadn't called her by name. He wouldn't know what her name was. And then he all of a sudden began to contort a little bit and growl, and she heard him say, "No, not now, not now." But he was beginning to have the appearance of a wolf, and she saw him transforming. Now you might think, well, how accurate could this have been? that a younger person could have had this experience and remembered. But the brother also saw it, and she described in minute detail the exact surroundings of where this happened, what it was like, what was next to it, the types of businesses that were there. And I was able to go on Google Earth and easily corroborate everything that she had said. And a lot of it was things that she wouldn't have really known, especially as a young girl. For instance, she said that the hatch he pushed up out of the street was square. And, most manholes that you've ever seen are round.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for a reason. And I know this because my husband is a civil engineer dealing in water treatment. Most are round so that they can have a little bit of a lip and it still won't fall in upon itself. It's the same distance across. That's why most manhole covers are round. And she said this one was square. And I went to my husband. I said, "Is there such a thing as a square manhole cover? Because I know they're supposed to be round." And I told him what she described. And he said, "Oh, yeah, that's the blah, blah, blah." And he rattled off some number model. And he said they normally use that for hatches or openings down into underground equipment, where they don't have basements.
Interesting.
And this was California.
Right.
Where there are very few basements to buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they would have needed, there was an apartment complex right there, and they would have needed some sort of utility room beneath to get in for electricity and that sort of thing.
I wanted to ask you, too, a lot of people ask me to talk to you about this, and believe it or not, we're almost out of time. So before I even ask this question, again, rattle it off where everybody could get your books. You said Monsters Among Us is your newest. Where could they get your stuff at?
Well, you can go to barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. Most of the online bookstores would have them. Many brick-and-mortar bookstores do also. And you can find my book list at Godfrey, Godfrey.com. Don't even need the WWs. And there's a books and bio page that you can click on and get some links to.
Right, and that's all linked up to mysticparanormal.net right now, guys. If you're on the website, right on the front page. Yep, and I wanted to tell you too, Linda. We're gonna have we're gonna put in our guest archive, and in our archive, we're gonna share all the links for our guests, so you'll constantly be linked with us, which is good.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, be sure to send me those links, and I'll post them too.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, there are also links to my Twitter page and my author page.
Okay.
At LindaGodfrey.com. So you can go. Please like my author page and join me on Twitter.
Yeah, and I'm sure my wife will do that if she hasn't. She runs all that stuff. Look, I wanted to ask you real quick. If one of these creatures were captured, let's say, the dog man or something. Let's say he was captured. Would you be one that would be like, okay, I want to see him, but I want to let him go too? Like, or would you want him to do all these different scientific experiments on him?
Well, Bigfoot, no question. I would want him to be released because they're so close to people, so very, very close.
I agree.
Yeah, and the dog man is a little different, but I still think they seem like they're more than just regular animals, even if it's just because they're so intelligent. I wouldn't mind, I guess, if one were darted and just given some quick exams while it was unconscious and then freed again. But unless, of course, there are some that are certain types that are very aggressive.
Right.
And if it had to be shot to save somebody, well, that's very different. You're always right in defending yourself. But
exactly.
Other than that, I don't think it's right to hunt to kill for no reason or to, do autopsies or other things that would harm them if one was captured. But you know what? After all these years, they seem pretty darn good at avoiding.
Yes, you're right about that. And it's funny, though, because you mentioned, darting them and everything, giving them kind of anesthesia or whatever. That I'm a true believer of aliens, extraterrestrials, and I believe that's what they're doing to us. I believe they capture us, they observe us, and they let us go. I truly believe that. I don't think that... I'm sorry, what was that?
Catch and release.
Yes, catch and release. I truly believe that we are not the most dominant species on this planet. I don't believe it. Although we could produce a nuclear bomb, let's use our intelligence to do something more than that. Maybe CERN will do something that, like you said, cures for cancer. All these different positive ways of using this technology. But before I leave, I got to ask you real quick. What's your opinion on Mothman? Do you believe he exists? Is he have you ever covered him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and Mothman has become sort of a catch-all term. It generally, for any of these flying things that have sort of a humanoid in the center, and there are different terms. There's bat squatch and man bat and all sorts of other terms. And yeah, I did investigate what I called the man bat firsthand in La Crosse, Wisconsin, probably about 11 years ago, where there were more than one sighting of it within a certain time frame. And I know that the two main witnesses that had one fly at the window of their pickup truck, and they thought it was going to smash right into the windshield, and instead it just flew up off into the trees shrieking, and they both became ill from it. I think there is some real phenomenon there, and I don't know if you're thinking about the many, there have been up to 50 sightings very recently over Chicago.
Oh, really? I'm not even aware of that.
Recently. Oh, yeah. Lon Strickler is one person that's been following them really clearly. You can go to the Phantoms and Monsters site. And there are others. My friend Allison Jorlin from Milwaukee, has been busily going to every single one of the sites and just jotting notes and seeing what she can see. So it's on a lot of people's minds right now. And I don't know that every single sighting that any person ever has is legitimate. Or we have things like very advanced paragliders and things like that maybe sometimes people could get away with reproducing the looks of one. But on the other hand, there have been too many that have been seen either up close or doing things that one of those contraptions couldn't do. So there's something to the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I'm reserving opinion yet because I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with Chicago. There have been so many, and they're over landmark areas, which is unusual.
Ooh.
Most of the time when you have these creatures, they're in what we call the liminal areas, sort of between here and there, the outskirts of town, the old gunnery range, whatever is not rural, not completely urban, but somewhere in between and hidden. That's where these things lurk. And so to see them over some of the main tourist areas and Lincoln Park and the Gold Coast in Chicago, that's where people are seeing them. It sort of upsets the apple cart as to what we thought we knew about the Mothman figures.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something's going to, either people who know more than they're telling now are going to come forward and let it be known, or who knows. It's just very, very odd what's happening right now.
Right, I agree. And I'll tell you what, Linda, we're out of time here, but I want to thank you so much. It's always entertaining to speak to you, but you got to do something. If you find a discovery or anything, please shoot an email to my producer. We want to hear about it right away.
Sounds good.
Hey, I'm sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
Just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you take care.